Hey, this is Gary.
This is Mike.
And Daniel. We're not professionals. We're just three addicts sharing our experiences, strength, and hope regarding recovery.
Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other addicts and to practice these principles in our lives.
Welcome to another episode of the 12th Step Podcast. This is Mike.
And this is Gary.
And this is Daniel.
Good to be back together again. Good to be back. We've had a great opportunity. We've got a couple emails, in fact, that have come in since our last time we got together. So tonight I will be reading one of the emails. This is from a concerned listener. Hi podcast guys. I've been listening to your show for a while and have really appreciated the honest and compassion in how you talk about recovery. I'm reaching out because I think I might be struggling with some form of sexual addiction, but I'm honestly confused and a little scared. How do I know if I'm a sex addict? What signs or patterns really indicate that it's an addiction and not just high sexual desire or poor self-control? If it turns out that I am a sex addict, why can't I just take a prescription medication to reduce my sex drive? Wouldn't that help manage the problem, or is there something deeper that medication alone can't fix? Also, if alcoholics and drug addicts define being sober by not drinking or using mind-altering substances, how does a sexual addict define sobriety without having to abstain from sex altogether? I'm struggling to understand what healthy recovery would even look like. Thank you for the work you do and for creating a space where people like me can ask questions without judgment. Any guidance or direction you can offer would mean a lot. Sincerely, a concerned listener. There is a lot to unpack in this email.
So much.
So let's start with just a few things. Our listener indicates that he's a little confused and a little scared, and I think that's a healthy place to be to start with. I think I can certainly relate. Let's put it that way. I remember my very first attempt. I had a fairly easy in. I actually had my counselor was a relationship of a brother of mine. They'd been neighbors and friends for lots of years, and I remember over the years of meeting him, and I thought, if I was in a place where I just couldn't function, and so I reached out to him and shot him an email and said, hey, could I come visit with you? And sat down with him that day and found out what I was dealing with was this addiction, and I was lost. I was confused, and I was a whole lot of scared. And so I can absolutely relate to what he's talking about. And I think each one of us could probably relate to some of those thoughts.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So how do I know if I'm a sex addict? Let's talk about that for just a second. I think we've addressed that a time or two. I think some of our very early on podcasts actually deal with the question of whether we think we've got a problem or not. In fact, I think that's the actual topic of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but do I have a problem? Isn't that the name of the actual podcast?
That was the name of the episode, yeah.
And he asked the question, what signs or patterns really indicate that this is an addiction, not just a high sexual desire or poor self-control? I think, and I'm a strong believer that both high sexual desire and poor self-control are absolutely conditions of being a sex addict. I think those are hallmarks, if you will, of, at least in my own experience, hallmarks of sexual addiction. Poor self-control is without a doubt. I mean, if I had an ability to control, to maintain self-control, I probably wouldn't have been an addict. And then this idea of high sexual desire, I think, was my escape. I think that was sort of my cheap, easy answer that I would always give. Well, I just happen to have a higher libido, I guess, than everybody else. That was what I told myself anyway. So anyway, thoughts? What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I absolutely agree. I've had a couple thoughts that kind of occurred to me while we were going through this. I would ask the whys. What am I using sex for? Why am I doing that? Because if you're using it to deal with boredom or stress or to reward yourself or to isolate yourself or to, if you're using it for things that it's not really intended to, like enriching your relationship with your significant other or procreation, or, you know, there's a lot of healthy uses for it, and there's it plays a role in our life. But if you're using it for something that as a way to deal with things, I think that's a really good indicator.
I would also put in there, you know, the actions that you're acting out. Are they creating negative consequences?
Yeah. And are you continuing to use it even in the face of those?
Yeah. That's one I would definitely say is, you know, if you're seeing that more than, hey, you know, I'm connecting and maybe my spouse is, you know, not agreeing on that. That doesn't mean you're an addict, you know, if you're asking for it, but, you know, if you're looking at pornography, if you're objectifying women, if you're objectifying even your spouse or your partner, and you're just seeing bits and parts instead of the person, if you're having affairs or relationships with other people other than your partner,
if you assess everybody sexually,
yeah, you know, more than likely, you know, and you're probably a sex addict, you know.
But again, I think it really comes down to, you know, it's let's see, what's the definition of addict that we like to use? Addiction is the continued use of any mind or mood altering substance or experience, even in the continued face of negative consequences.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. So continued use of in the face of negative consequences. You're right. That's exactly what it is. I think there's a couple things here that jump out first of all. You know, Gary brought up something that was fascinating to me is that if we're using sex as a means of dealing with stress. I remember doing an internet search one time, realizing, and I think I saw a survey at one point in time that indicated that a very large majority, well above 60 or 70% of people, engage in sexual activities as a reduction of stress. So I think that's fairly common out there. Not to say that that's right or wrong. It's to say that based on sort of our healthy understanding of what sex is or isn't, that's probably not a meaningful activity to engage in simply because I'm just stressed. Get over here, dear. I'm stressed. That kind of a thing.
Right,
That's not healthy. So that's one of the first things. The second things I think that and I think Daniel sort of brought this out is that, you know, all right, so we may be engaging in this behavior right now. We may not necessarily be seeing the negative consequences, but at some point in time you will. I think of my own life. You know, when I first started my behavior, I was at a very, very young age, really young, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood, and it served so many purposes at a very young age for everything that I was experiencing, the high anxiety I was experiencing, the relaxation that I needed to go to sleep, all of those sorts of things. There was a payoff, and that's why I engaged in it. But that doesn't mean, and so I engaged in those behaviors for a really long time because it helped. But at some point in time, it was so damaging and so life altering that at some point in time, it's no longer serving its purpose. Or it took higher amounts. I will say that in my own experience, it took higher amounts of and different kinds of behavior that ultimately led me to a place that I was engaging in illegal activity, as I know some of you both were as well. You know, engaging in illegal activity and engaging in behavior that was certainly not conducive to a happier, normal marriage. You know, multiple affairs, a variety of things like that. So suddenly what started out as a seemingly innocent, innocuous little thing that was going on alone turned into be something that was going to be dangerous and unhealthy behavior. So if our reader is, you know, maybe they're in that spot right now where it doesn't feel like it's out of control. But all I can say is that at some point it will be.
He goes on to say that if it turns out that I am a sex addict, why can't I just take a prescription medication or to reduce my sex drive? Wouldn't that help manage the problem? Or is there something deeper that medications alone can't fix? Well, you know, an alcoholic doesn't drink because they're thirsty. And there's not a magic pill.
There isn't.
There's not. You know, Michael comment on this in a minute because I know he will, but there's not an easy way. if there was an easy way to overcome this or to do it by yourself, we all would have found it along the way.
Oh yeah. I mean, recovery centers would be out of business.
Oh, sure.
And they could just say, here's the pill. Take it for 90 days, you're done.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist.
That's a different kind of addiction to start taking chemical something. But
They're at least except for some of the newer addicts, my experience, from being in Sage and therapy and that, is there's always something deeply rooted that's connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to work through that. And that takes time.
Yes. Yes to all the above. You may be thinking, Gary, of a specific experience or thought that I had I'm drawing a blank on it, so you may have to prompt me a little bit here. But I will tell you that I had explored, if you can believe this, I had explored at some point in time, is it possible to perform some sort of a surgery or something like that that make this problem go away? I did some research on that as well. I didn't know this, but there was a group of folks in a penitentiary who were exploring a similar option, thinking that somehow, some way, that if they just removed specific organs from their body, that they wouldn't be experiencing this kind of thing. The reality of it is that so much of our sexual experience occurs in our mind. Mm-hmm. It's not just necessarily a physiological experience, but it's also a very visual and everything else associated, and it's associated with just a myriad of emotions and chemical reactions and things like that place us in different, that gives us the kind of spike and dopamine spike, things like that in our brain cells. And so it's so much larger than just taking a pill or just removing an organ or something like that. The reality of it is it's deep-seated stuff, and it needs some help, guidance, and direction in terms of understanding it completely in our own physical, in our own experience.
That's all I was, because you'd mentioned stuff like that. That's what I wanted you to say, Mike.
I had shared that before.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I remembered or shared that, but I did think of that as I read over this. I remember thinking to myself at the time then is that, literally, if I could just, my word, if I could just do something to, to make this issue go away, how my life would be different. And it's a shame to think that I would arrive at some sort of mutilation as a possibility, or surgery or something like that to really, I really desperately wanted to be done with this problem.
Sure.
That's really what I wanted. And it was just one of those things that just never went away. It was constantly on my mind. And it almost drove me to a state of madness. So it was, to get the kind of help that I needed required a whole lot more than something that medication, a pill, or anything like that could relieve me from.
Well, one thing I want to put out there is, we're not saying that this listener is any different from any of us. We've all thought this.
Oh, for sure.
Probably every addict that's ever shown up to the door of a therapist has asked, "Hey, is there a special recipe, some pill that I can take that I can just be done with this?" Because we've all tried to do it our own way and we just can't figure it out. I know there's been multiple times, in group therapy settings where, this very question or very similar to this question has come up, and our common counselors just had to say, no, there isn't easy way through this. You have to commit, you have to dive in, you have to do it. And you got to find out why.
Yeah, got to find out your whys.
The addiction is just the symptom. It's the symptom of whatever is brewing underneath the surface. Yeah,
whatever behaviors you've chosen to indulge in, it's your drug of choice. It's what you've chosen or learned to use to deal with something. Mm-hmm. Your next question goes into about defining sobriety, and the reality of it is that if you don't change the thinking underneath it, our common counselor, he used to say it's like a dry drunk. You haven't changed the underlying thinking or solved the underlying problems. You're just, and you'll find some other way to act out, but you'll keep that way of thinking alive. inside
neural
you.
pathways,
the neural pathways. You'll just, and then the minute you get the chance to do it, you'll get back into it. As far as defining sobriety, a lot of that is going to depend on you and what you come up with, who your significant partner is, assuming that you have one, or you're going to have to talk with your counselor, your sponsor, your mentors, things like that, and find out what level is healthy for you. I mean, it's okay to have sex. It's not okay for sex to have you, if that makes sense, because you're not wrong. It's not like a substance or some, it's not drinking or a mind altering substance. It's something that's a part of you, which and I've heard a lot of people who've struggled with multiple addictions say that sexual addiction is one of the hardest to overcome, because it's a part of you. It's always there. So you have to learn what it's used for, and learn to use it that way, and not as your crutch or your way to deal with things. So you'll get to, and different, like I know SAA, you get to define what sobriety looks like for you. In SA, they have a very clear-cut definition of what sobriety is. So you got to find what's going to work for you and then go that way.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think, which sort of begs the question then, sort of, where do I go from here, and how do I move forward in this particular thing? I would think the first thing I would recommend to our listener here is that find a counselor that makes some sense. I would find one that's CSAT trained. This obviously is an area of expertise for that individual then, and they can provide some real guidance and direction. But with a counselor, and then also with participating in a 12-step program of some type, as Gary's mentioned, SA or SAA, that what comes from that then is a definition for yourself, and that one can move forward in making a determination about what's healthy for them and what's not healthy for them, and how they're interacting with their partner or partners, and define some boundaries, and define some healthy living and some unhealthy boundaries and unhealthy living kind of stuff. And with that, then can really move forward in a meaningful way. Because this is, I appreciated his comment that he's scared.
Sure.
I guess I made a presumption there, but the point being is that this person is afraid, and I think there's answers out there. There are people that can help. There are. It sounds big and ominous and overwhelming, and it's all of those things at first. But find yourself some people who have gone this path. Get in touch with a sponsor. Get in touch with somebody who can help, somebody who knows something about this in your area, and start meeting with people that literally become your tribe, who understand what you're dealing with, and that you can share with, and that understands you completely, and then it won't feel quite so big. Yeah. I think that's probably the advice I'd have.
I mean,
because you need to feel that way.
Mm-hmm. I think you're asking all the right questions too. I mean, I remember, when you start wrestling with the idea of, oh my goodness, am I a sex addict? That's a hard pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. And you kind of, honestly, you internally rebel against it a little bit, because it's, I don't want to be, and
yeah,
but some of the questions you asked, I think we've all used them. I just have a high sex driver. Or
my partner has a low sex drive.
Yeah, my partner has a low sex drive.
Or isn't interested in me.
Right. Yeah. But the reality of it is, and I can only speak for myself here, but deep down, I may not have wanted to name it, but I knew I had a problem. I knew that, and the way that I knew that I had a problem was I kept trying to stop it or change it and was powerless to do so. And it was very difficult for me to round the corner and say, you know what? No, I really do have a problem, and maybe it's time to call a spade a spade.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing...
And, that comes to us at various times in our existence as well, right? I mean, you and I may be different than Gary or than Daniel, right? I mean,
Sure.
how much did we have to lose? How much did we have to experience before we arrived at the place where we were not functioning and not working well and not, and I remember my world feeling like it was all falling apart. Every relationship that was important to me with family was, with my wife and my kids and all that stuff was in jeopardy. I remember all of those things were just, and it was scary to think about in terms of my relationship with a higher power. All of those things, the faith of my choosing, all those things were in jeopardy. I felt like that I lived kind of a lifestyle that if that news got out, that I'd have clients that would have a real hard time with that. So everything was in jeopardy.
Sure.
Everything that I knew, my career, my family life, my relationship with kids, with everyone around me. So I was scared to death. I was absolutely scared to death.
Desire to keep it a secret's a big indicator.
Oh yeah.
Yes. That's a great one. Maybe those are, there's 5 or 6 things that jump out on a page right now that suggest there definitely is a problem, and one of those is absolutely a desire to keep it a secret, an unwillingness to talk to somebody about it, an unwillingness to. I mean, wouldn't it be great just to go visit with a counselor and sit down and say, "I have a problem here," and have them say, "Yeah, you have a real life problem here." At least you come away informed. Now where do I go from here?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing, like you said, go see a counselor. I mean, we can definitely sit and make assumptions and try to provide information based off our own experience. But the best way to determine if you're an addict is go see a CSAT trained therapist, talk with them, be open and honest with them.
Yeah.
Don't BS them, just be honest. What behaviors are coming up? If you have a spouse or a partner, what are they complaining? What behaviors are you doing that they're complaining about? What are the things that are creating negative consequences in your life? Just put it out on the table with them. They're not going to think negatively of you, but the more information you can give them, the better and better balanced and more perfect help they can give you.
It's all got to come out eventually anyway.
It does. That and for me that was the hardest thing is just
for sure.
being honest and throwing it all out there. Not that I wasn't willing to, but there's still a part of you, no matter what, even if you're desperate, that still wants to hold back, still wants to cling to something.
Sure.
Because, well, what if they don't trust me? Or what if they turn out to be how I think they're going to be in my head and they're going to reject me? They're not. That's what they're there for. They're there to help you. Put it all out on the table, and you'll be surprised.
Well, I will tell you this. It's obvious to me that this listener has some concern and has some sense that perhaps something's amiss, because why then would they have found our podcast and listened to us for 30 minutes and then gone to the great length of actually writing in? Mm-hmm. If they weren't at all thinking to themselves, maybe something's wrong here.
Well,
and that's the first step. Yeah. That's the monstrous first step right there, is recognition that, hey, something's amiss here in my life, and based on what I'm hearing from these people, who I don't know, I just pulled up a podcast and I listened to it, and I got the sense that maybe I've got a problem. That's, that, like I said, that's a big step. That's a big step in the right direction. Now see that all the way through by spending some money with a counselor to just understand it a little bit more.
Yeah. He's definitely been listening for a while. He says I've listened to a few episodes or something along that line. So there's an inkling.
Sure.
There's something there.
You're concerned. I think
You're concerned, or your partner's concerned. Someone is concerned that is trying to give you a nudge to finally dive into the pool instead of, occasionally dipping your toe in there. You've got this.
Yeah.
Go see a therapist, a CSAT therapist. Let them know everything on the table. Let them help you decide if this is really something you do have. More than likely, the answer is yes. But without knowing all the details, we can't really say. but the therapist will be able to really help you
And
determine that.
whatever the result, it's a step forward, and
Yes.
you'll be better off for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I recognize the confusion. I remember when my wife found out that when I confessed to her that I was a sex addict, she went to the internet to find out what that was. I think there's a lot of misconception in the universe out there about what addictive behaviors are, what good mental health is, what bad mental health is, what addictions are. And there's certainly a lot that swims around the idea of sex addiction that's confusing. And so I can understand that confusion. I completely relate to that confusion. I don't know that it's clearly defined. So it'll be great for you to then have a chance to sit down with somebody who does understand and can help work through how it's affecting your life.
Yeah.
Your life individually, because I think that has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
So fascinating topic. I'm thrilled that people have found us and have done some of their own little research to either listen to our podcasts and then evaluate their own life and then think about what that means in terms of, wow, I wonder if I'm dealing with something like that or am I not?
Yeah.
We don't typically get someone who's listening to our podcasts asking that kind of a question. That's insightful. I think that's very insightful for them to evaluate that based on what they've heard on our podcast.
Yeah.
Well,
So any other additional advice for our listener?
let us know how you're doing.
Yeah.
Go do what you need to do, and then let us know how it goes.
Yeah, I think so. I'd love to have a follow-up. That would be great. Once the person has had a chance to see a counselor and evaluate that a little bit more, and then come back and say, look, I took your advice, and this is what we did, and it turns out these are the things I'm struggling with, and I appreciate your advice. So that's great. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close this episode.
Okay.
This is Mike saying, do the work necessary to find the peace that recovery can bring.
And this is Gary saying, do the next right thing.
And this is Daniel saying, find the humility in your recovery.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.
As a fellowship of recovering addicts, Sex Addicts Anonymous offers a message of hope to anyone who suffers from sex addiction. Check out saa-recovery.org.